Hi, Jude. You're on mute. There you are. Yay.
And you come on, you're automatically muted, so it takes time.
There you go. So I did, yeah, so I saw Ed's email. Ed will be joining.
Good.
And I know we'll have Connor whenever he gets a chance to join by phone.
Okay.
So we'll just hang on and for a moment and we'll hope we get Ed in a moment.
That would be good.
He's not on yet. and we're not on mute, by the way.
Hello, hi. When is the public be heard?
Well, normally the public be heard is at the end of the meeting. So just the protocol for those that are on who may not have been on before. So this is a zoning revision committee meeting, and I am the chair of the zoning revision committee, and the members are myself, Jude, who is on, Ed Sanders, who will be joining, and Connor Wenk, who will be joining, but by phone. So it's the zoning revision committee members speaking. And if people do want to chime in, I will call on people to chime in if you so chose, but we want to keep the progress of the meeting going. So the true public be heard is at the end. And then I stay on to listen to what the public have to say. So the protocol is, as long as we have continued forward progress, it's okay to entertain a comment here and there, but the true public be heard is at the end.
Okay, do you need your list of names? Do you take names and we go in order?
Well, what's really good is this is recorded in the chat, actually. Oh, in terms of who wants to speak?
Yeah.
If you're telling me now you want to speak, I'll have you be first. Is that what you'd like?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So you are the narrator, and I'm not quite sure of your full name.
Chris Bailey.
Oh, Chris. Okay. Thank you, Chris. So I can have you first for the public be heard. And if
Hi,
I forget, you can remind me.
Yeah.
So cool.
It did go over the fence.
What?
I said it did go over the fence. Do you remember you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Little league, that home run that Kyle hit.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He's out of that video.
Okay. Gosh, I've been having memory issues.
That's a long time ago, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I had sent a letter to the board. I was wondering if people received it.
I would have to go take a peek here. I don't believe that I mean, I've read a number of letters and yours may have been one of them, and I would have to go back and check.
Okay.
So let me go, I'll go check while we're waiting for Ed to join. And we need 3 as a quorum, so that's why I'm waiting for Ed to join. Let me do a search. So if I search, Ada, your ID is?
My ID or my email, you mean?
Well, your
No.
email ID, yeah. So if I look for your email.
adafrank@gmail.com.
Oh, one word at Gmail. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Colony, we're not really, the noise, so the email I'm looking at has to do with Colony Outdoor Concerts.
Not from me.
Well, the only thing that when I did a search on Ada Frank, I just got something about Colony Outdoor Concerts that you sent.
No, I never wrote a letter to that.
Okay, well, there's a January 26, 2022. So that would have been 2 full years ago.
Yeah, no, it was today.
So did you send it to my lricky@woodstockny.org?
I'd have to look it up who I sent it to. Deborah Dewan gave me a bunch of addresses, so I just sent it to those, including.
Well, I can tell you I don't have it.
While we're on the subject, did you get Laura Hinton's email?
Well,
Laura Hinton sent an email to town board members.
Well, okay, so you can give me a, I will check.
I did send it to Bill and to a number and 5 more. Hold on. Bennett, Deputy Supervisor, Maria Elena, and
Conti, yeah.
A. Cortis. Probably a couple of them, I guess, were left out, or I'm not sure if
Well,
she.
well, I'm certainly not seeing it.
Yeah, no, I have a, what's your email?
lricky@woodstockny.org.
Let me write that down.
Okay.
L
lricky@woodstockny.org.
RICCI, right?
Correct.
At
woodstockny.org.
woodstockny.org. Okay.
There's
I
Ed.
can send it to you right now.
Okay, sounds good. So as soon as we have Ed join, there's Ed and he's there. Okay, so we do have a quorum. And Ed, just so that you know, Connor is en route because he's on his way up from Newark, New Jersey. So he's going to join as soon as he can by phone. So a couple of I'll just make 2 quick announcements. One is, as I mentioned to both Jude and Ed, I put in a voicemail to you that you maybe have heard. So Bill did reset the ZRC. We had 2 members that for medical reasons really haven't been involved for quite a long time. And then we have Jeff Collins, who very excited that he's in the county legislature. However, that's consuming his time and he is no longer on the ZRC. Our ZRC officially is Jude, Ed, Jude, who's on, Ed, who is on, Connor, who will be joining us by phone as soon as he can, and myself. So right now we have a 4-member ZRC, and the town has put in an ad in the paper because some committees in general are missing people, but with our number of 5 or 4, our quorum is 3. So I'm happy to say we do have a quorum with Jude, Ed, and me. So we do have a quorum.
So how does one apply to join the ZRC? I understand you have 2 openings.
Well, basically, it's kind of funny. We're not a committee that has a set number of people. So we've had 6 for a while. We had 7. Now we've gone from 7 down to 4. So we'll interview people, and what we have is a sliding scale in a way. If we do add 3 more, then we'd have 7. Our quorum is 4. If we have 6, our quorum is 4. If we have 5 or 4, our quorum is 3. You would apply by emailing the supervisor's office, email the supervisor, and then the town board would interview you. You would email with your reasons why you'd want to join, and then the town board would interview you, and then we would take it from there. But understand that when you join the zoning revision committee, it's for all zoning things. Right now we're doing STRs, and if you have a focus on STRs, it's not a good reason to join the ZRC because we're going to move on from that to other things. So if you have a single focus, it's not, anyway. So
Laura, did you receive, I sent it to you. I just want to check that I sent.
Okay. Well, okay. So, but since we do have Ed on the call, we're going to officially start the call. So we'll save those for the end.
That's fine.
So that was the one announcement. The other announcement is for the ZRC is the scenic overlay is on the agenda for the next town board meeting. So what's on the agenda for it is resuming the public hearing. So just for the ZRC, so that you do know that on Tuesday, March 12th, the town board will resume the public hearing on scenic overlay, and with some luck, we'll also pass a resolution because we made the update. I'm sure I sent it to everybody here. Everybody on the ZRC here. So Bill had asked for one update, made the update, sent it to the ZRC, sent it to the town board. People have had a chance to be looking at it, digesting it. It wasn't a very big change. And the town board was in support of the scenic overlay law previously. So I expect to not have any issue with moving it forward. So in any event, the public hearing will resume on Tuesday, March 12th. And fingers are crossed, if we're lucky, we can even pass a resolution on that date to pass the scenic overlay law. So that's the status of the scenic overlay law.
Can I ask a question? Another question about old business?
Oh, yes, totally.
For the wellhead protection law, that's been adopted. Has the map been adopted by the town?
Well, it was all adopted, and then the question is, where is it? So if you go on the website, do you see it? So I will need to double check that. And the other conversation is, we've adopted the wellhead protection, we've adopted the telecommunications law, and both of those, Bill has told me that Jackie is working on getting them in E-code. Because the thought was, well, we got this housing oversight law, we're just pop them all in at the same time, except for the fact that the housing oversight law is not moving along. You know, it's got a little work to do before it goes in. So Jackie is looking at getting those into E-code. So they're passed as law. The departments in the town of Woodstock are going to treat them as law because they are law, but it's always helpful if they're in E-code because that's where people go to find the latest law. So,
E-code is a database?
E-code is a website.
Okay.
It contains the zoning law and all the laws of the town. And you can just, town of Woodstock, New York, zoning laws or laws, and E-code will come up. But the map, the wellhead protection map was also adopted along with the law.
Yeah, the map was adopted because that's part of the law. The law and the map were adopted together. So it's a map, but it's a good for us to double check and make sure it's on the website so if people go to access it. Because just like the zoning map of what the zones are in town are on the website. Right. We should make sure that law is, I believe it is, but I should double check it.
Okay, thank you.
So cool. You're welcome. Okay, so that's it for announcements. Where we left off last time, and let me just pull up the email that we were looking at. Let me just get it here because we were going through conversations. Just take me a second to bring the right thing up here. There we go. And then I will share my screen in a moment. Oh, there we go. Admit. Okay, and I'm still watching the waiting room as well to make sure we're bringing people in. So I've got one more coming in. So I will share my screen. Should go to the right spot now. There we go. So I will do a forward because this is what I do. And then that way all my comments are there. And I'm going to close that down. Ooh. And I'm not sure if that's Connor or not. As soon as the phone number comes in, I will. Okay. So I have somebody on phone that is on mute. Connor, I don't know if that's you. I know you were going to be calling in, and I don't know if that's you by phone. But anyway, I do know we have somebody by phone here. But they're on mute, and I can't unmute anybody. So there we are. So anyway, where we left off, and shrinking this down. So screen sharing here. And we've been going through, and this was a list of questions that Jude had put together, and we've been going through the answers, and we're down here, and I'm going to do today's notes in green. So that's what I will do. Green notes, and it's going to be green in a minute. 226, 24. Let me see if I can make it green. There we go. So we're green. All right. So just a reminder where we are so far, and also a reminder for those listening in. So we're still what I would call kind of at a brainstorming stage. We're discussing what the Zoning Revision Committee is discussing with STRs right now. Is we're really discussing what things do we think belong in the STR law, but it's really still at a brainstorming stage. So we're putting ideas out there, and we're still fleshing out the ideas. Nothing is cast in concrete. Everything is being discussed, and but my prediction, however, is there are people that feel very strongly one way, and some people that feel very strongly the other way, and we'll do our best to do, the goal is to do what's best for Woodstock. And that they'll come down to making decisions about, do we go this way or that way? But the goal is always to do what's best for Woodstock. So we'll keep that in mind as we make decisions.
Well, how do you
So-
feel about Bill McKenna going around you and making a decision?
Well, okay, so that's part of public be heard. We'll take that up at the end. So at this point, we're into the zoning revision committee, and we're not getting distracted. If you have a comment that helps us move forward, that's great. If you have a comment that takes us off track, that'll be at the end of that'll be part of the public be heard. So, okay. So anyway, one of the things that we had talked about, one of the basics is we talked about four types of STRs. We talked about there being two types if the owner is not on premise, and two types if the owner is on premise. So if the owner is on premise, the owner, it may be that they live in the same dwelling as the STR, and perhaps they're renting bedrooms in a house. That's an example of number 3, owner occupied. They're not renting out a whole dwelling unit. They're just renting out part, and they're still in part. Number 4, the owner is on premise, but what they're renting out is a full dwelling unit. It might be an accessory dwelling unit. It could be, that would be pretty much be what it is an accessory dwelling unit that they're renting out the full thing. So that would be owner is on premise. They're still living there, but they're not renting out, but they're renting out an entire dwelling unit. So items 1 and 2 are the owner is not on premise. Item number 2, the example would be if somebody's renting out their unit for less than 30 days per year, then that is kind of the thing that perhaps, I don't know if snowbird is the best description. Maybe there's a better description, but somebody who just goes away in January and February, that's just what they do. And they want to rent their house because they're not in it. They're still living in it. It's still their primary residence, but they're not going to be there for a couple months out of the year. So why not rent it out? So what we had said there is less than 30 days per year. So it's an incidental renting, less than 30 days a year. And there's some discussion of what that number of days should be. But the idea is they're probably not, say they're going 2 months out of the year, January, February, but they're probably not renting it for the full 60 days. They're probably maybe weekends or anyway. So the thought is if somebody's going 2 months of the year, 30 days may cover what they're trying to do because they're not going to rent 2 months straight anyway, is what the expectation is for a short term. And if they do, if they rent over 30 days, it's considered long term anyway. So that's where the 30 days came from. And then number 1 is the owner not on premise, a single dwelling unit on the property, and the entire dwelling unit is rented for more than 30 days in a year. And this may be the case if somebody buys a property because they really want to be an STR. It's really an investment for them. And it's a revolving door situation. But it's pretty much purely an investment. So we thought those 4 categories. What we have not yet done is we have not yet gone through what my expectation is that for the 4 units that they'll have different fees. They'll probably have different, the annual fee could be different. The number of the cap will probably be different. So we haven't got into what the caps ought to be and what the fees ought to be, but more attractive to Woodstock, and I know we'll get into that argument, but that'll be publicly heard later. But the more attractive to Woodstock, I think, is when the owner is on premise and we have somebody who lives here, because we want to be a community, not a commodity. That's what we want Woodstock to be, community, not commodity. If the owner is on premise, they're living here, they're part of the community, but they need some help, maybe paying their taxes or their bills or whatever else, and that's why they're doing this. What is the owner not on premise? If it's your primary residence and you're just renting out a few days, that's still attractive too, because we still have somebody who's part of the community because they're here most of the time. The one that in my opinion, that is less attractive, but we still want, because we're a tourist community, we don't have a lot of hotels, and we still do want a place for people to come, tourists to come. And there are benefits. I understand there's benefits to the center of town. There's benefits to, I know people that make more money because I know somebody who cleans, and I make more money cleaning for a short-term rental than I do cleaning not short-term rentals. I really, so I know that there's benefits. but the cap is probably going to be a little stricter on number one. That's just my prediction. So, but again, we're not there yet. We haven't defined caps yet. We haven't defined fees yet, but they may be different for the different types. So the only comment I'm going to put here before I leave this topic is I'm going to add a however. However, we have not yet determined recommended fees, caps for these different types.
So where did Bill McKenna get the $400 for everybody?
That'll be after that. That's not part of what the ZRC is talking about. So that will be something we can talk about later. Okay. So anyway, so
Can we stay on this for a few minutes?
can we stay on this? Yes. Yes, Jude, go ahead.
I have some suggestions. For number 3, renting a bedroom in a house, not separate with the sharing kitchen facilities, not with their own separate kitchen facilities, but somebody who's renting a bedroom in their house with shared kitchen facilities with the host.
Okay. That.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. Maybe we just never got it down, but that was the idea. It's a bedroom. It's not an apartment.
Well, yeah, an apartment would be a whole dwelling unit, correct?
So the owner on premises, not the same dwelling. We're talking basically about accessory dwelling units or something of that nature. I mean, I guess that's exactly what it would be, whether it's attached or detached. I would like to propose that we do something similar to what they did when the town adopted the accessory dwelling unit or accessory apartments, which was can be an STR as of this date. So it's for accessory dwelling units that exist as of this date. In other words, you're not going to come in and build one and do this. This is for people who already have them. I just think that's a good addition because it allows for people who are already here, had certain expectations, but it's not going to, if you want to build one, you can rent it long-term or you can use it as a guest house or whatever, but not for a short-term rental. I think that's sort of a happy medium between what was proposed in the revisions and what we're trying to do here. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'll write it down as a discussion point.
Okay.
I
just don't want to see a lot of them go up for that purpose. I want to, and I think the idea is if they are built, it would be better if they were used as long-term rentals. So this way, it's sort of and this is what was done with the, when the accessory apartments law was added to the zoning law, which was if you had an apartment that was attached, you could, that was fine, but for detached, it had to be something that already exists, a building that already existed.
Okay, so what I want to call your attention to is, and we might have had, I'm not sure who all was voting at this time, because Jeff might have still been one of us at this time, but we did do, because in blue is, and he probably was, in blue was from January 22nd, and I think he might have been one of the 4 people, but this item 3 down here, we raised the question of the ZRC at the time, can ADUs be STRs? And when we polled the ZRC, one choice was no, the first ADU can't be an STR, but the second ADU can, which is what, right now there's not a second ADU, but if the new Housing Oversight Task Force law got passed, there could be a second ADU, but today there can't be. But hypothetically speaking, 2 of the ZRC members said, we do not want the first ADU to be short-term rental, but if there is a second, they could. 2 ZRC members said yes. Then the question was no to the second ADU. Maybe the first ADU can be an STR. 1 member said that, and then 1 member said yes, the first ADU could be an STR, but manage it with the cap. So we had so that would be a case of where if we said, hey, this is owner on premise. Well, and it could, maybe the owner's not on premise anyway. Right. So we had so we did a vote and we could re-vote, but that's how we voted when we talked about it before. So we probably want to come back to that and discuss. So it's an item for discussion. Do we want to limit it to just ADUs in existence at the time the law is passed? maybe, I know we're trying to get more long-term rentals, but then we also have people, people are should we grandfather people? That's another question. Should we grandfather people that have their first ADU is an STR today? That's another question. What do you want to do about grandfathering? So,
Ed
so,
has some-
so I'm going to add items for discussion. I'll just say 1, do we want to, and 2, what do we want to do about grandfathering?
Ed, you're muted.
I'm muted.
Ed,
Ed's muted. Okay. 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 But the other thing that I did want to say
I
is,
wanted to support Jude's proposal.
okay. Okay. So I'll say 2 ZRC. Say yes. Okay. Okay.
okay. So this was my other suggestion, just so that we make some forward progress.
Uh-huh.
What if a couple of us just draft some definitions for those 4 things? Not that they're written in stone, but that we actually define them for definitions that would go in the law.
Okay.
What if we start doing it? Because I feel like we're, okay, so we don't know exactly what the caps are going to be or anything like that, but we could begin to define what they mean. The other thing is this owner on premises single dwelling unit, more than 30 days, but fewer than a question mark number. Because it's not going to be, they're not going to rent 365 days a year, no matter what.
Well, but that was so, and good point is then what limitations do we want to put? Because the limitation today, you can only get, Connor entered the waiting room. Yay. Okay. So, so then the other question is, what limitations do we want to put even on number 1? Because there are limitations today. Even
Right.
if you're not owner occupied, you still have a limit. So that's an excellent point.
So, not more than 30, for more than 30, but fewer than, and then a question mark there until we come up with a number. But the idea being that there will be a limitation on that.
And so let me just,
And that's something that, we're going to need to work through.
okay. So let me put it in green so that we know the, and back to your other question is, if you're volunteering, that would be wonderful. If you're, I don't know who we have. And so first of all, Connor, I see your name there, not just a phone number. Connor, are you live and can you say hi?
I am alive and I can say hi.
Well, I knew you were alive. I didn't know if you were alive, but you're alive. Yay! Happy to hear both. Okay, so we're, as you can see, I'm sharing my screen, and we're just rehashing a little bit the 4 types, because that's the basis of all discussion that follows, is just remembering where we are with the 4 types, because things build on that. So
Sure.
the green, the green is what we added today based on the discussion. What I do want to add, though, is I do want to say, owner on premise, not the same dwelling. The other thing that I think is an item for discussion is somebody may own more than 1 lot. So they're living on their lot, and they may have a lot that is adjoining their lot, and that's where the other building is, and that's what they're going to STR. So the other thing to discuss and decide is, do we count that as owner on premise? Because it's just the fact of it's a different lot, but they're still.
Well, would we want to maybe put in just to come back to it as some sort of language about non-contiguous property or a contiguous property exception?
Well, so, yeah, well, there you go. Not the same dwelling unit. So I'm just going to put in here as an item 3. Do we want to count?
I kind of like the idea of a contiguous property exception. Not sure how I feel about it entirely, but to say that rather than framing the rest of the language around non-contiguous, like, I like that personally.
So I think that the Hurley law actually has something like that in it, so we could look at the language that they use.
Yeah,
I think we
excellent.
have something very similar, which is if it's your lot next door, right?
So,
Can I
right, so,
comment on number 3 a moment? I think shared kitchen facilities with the host is a bit restrictive. My situation is I have a basement converted to a one-bedroom apartment, and they have their own kitchen. But
then it's an ADU. That counts as an accessory dwelling unit. If somebody can fully live there because they have their own kitchen, that is defined as an ADU. That's kind of part of the definition.
oh God, well, it's not I mean, it's not a full kitchen.
Well, okay, so the rest of this conversation goes to the end and public be heard. So, in any event, because again, we're keeping forward motion.
Well, but I think these definitions are not enough.
Sir, we can't be building our zoning law around any one person's situation. We're totally here to listen to you at the end of the meeting, but it's imperative that we move forward, and we do so in a somewhat expeditious manner. So with all due respect, please respect our process.
So, okay, so, and thanks, Connor. So in any event, so is there anything else, ZRC members, that's Ed, Connor, Jude, and me, of course. Is there anybody else? Do we want to say anything? Well, so Jude, were you offering to define definitions? And if so, were you looking for a partner to do that?
Yeah, I'll help.
Yeah, I would,
Okay,
we can take a crack at it.
okay, so Jude,
Examples so we can draw on.
so
them.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that question? I may have missed the sort of premise of what
the
you're asking.
question, yeah, well, yeah, what Jude was saying was that now that we've got some of these things fleshed out, it would probably help our conversations if we had an actual definition that we're going with. So now that we've got the basic idea of what's number 1, 2, 3, and 4, she was offering to help write up a definition, and Ed just volunteered to help. So I think that's a good.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so anyway, so I'll just add here, I just add a note here. Note, Jude and Ed volunteered to document based on these.
There was also a text I saw just now that somebody from the Woodstock SDR Association was volunteering some of their people.
Well, they're actually not on the ZRC, but we'll be going over these things here, and we'll be able to get feedback from people because we'll be going over them in future meetings. This is not going to be a tomorrow process. We're not trying to ram a law through. This is where we are today. We'll be looking at the definitions. We'll be sharing all this so that people get it. People will certainly have chances to input before this goes to the town board. So, okay.
I do want to say, though, we're offering to help is what we are doing. We're offering to help because we have a lot of knowledge that we've developed over the last 2 years.
Okay, is that Lisa?
If I
This
can
is
just,
Lisa,
I'm
yes.
sorry. And while I do appreciate that, Lisa, and you have mentioned that before, I'm not speaking for the board, but I do just have to say again, organizations like yours have had the opportunity to present to us, and we are operating in public in a way that allows for public to give their input in a way that is considered at the end of these meetings. But I feel personally that we can't keep having constant chime-ins. We need to keep things organized. We need to keep this moving. And I personally would appreciate it if we can save comments, criticisms till the end.
Yeah.
We're going to do it every single meeting.
And the other thing,
No other board operates like this, just so
yeah.
you guys.
So the other thing I do want to say is we're so fortunate to have Ed. We're fortunate to have Connor, Jude, and Ed. But Ed has a ton of experience writing law, so I'm 100% confident there. Jude has a lot of experience with the Zoning Board of Appeals. She's very knowledgeable about the law. Connor has knowledge from having been on the planning board, very knowledgeable about the law. So we have people that are very knowledgeable. So I'm totally confident because then we're also going to have feedback. People will have plenty of opportunity for feedback, but I'm very confident with the skills and experiences of the zoning revision committee. That being said, zoning revision committee, is there anything else that we want to add to the comments for these 4 types, 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I just want to say, I was also on the planning board, so.
Thank you. I think that was before and I was too, by the way. Yeah.
You know.
And I think we're on at different times, but yes, thank you. So good. So, okay, anything else you want to add for these 4 types, items 1 through 4?
I think it's a good basis to start writing. And like I said, none of it has to be written in stone, but I think it's a good place for us to start writing and then work from there. I think it's good.
Yeah, with the stuff that's in green and giving Ed and Jude a crack at, synthesizing that, we can come back and see where we go from there.
Yep. Sounds perfect. Okay, so we'll move on. Other basics, just to make sure we're all remembering all the basics. Yeah, any owner can only have 1 STR. Yep. And we want to make sure we start getting LLC owners so we know all the names on an application, all the owners of an LLC, to make sure that somebody's not part of an LLC, have an STR, and then they're also having one in a different name. So we do want to beef up our applications a little bit with that. ADUs can be STR. We just talked about that. We had kind of a mixed feedback on that, but we'll be talking more about that.
Connor didn't weigh in on that. Do we want to give him a moment to?
Well, and I think that I forget who the 4 were. I think that Jeff was one of the 4 at this point in time, and we only had 2 said this.
I did weigh in on that. I believe at the time just to put it out there that I feel like I was a definite no on the first ADU and maybe on the second ADU. But there were also talks, and maybe this is a good one for some green text, about saying that you can only STR your second ADU, assuming that is something that we go with,
right,
if your primary is first ADU is made available for affordable housing. Or even again, and I don't want to be wistful or naive about, it needs to be a discussion of how we would monitor that, how we would enforce that. So that could be affordable housing or even just long-term rental. As long-term rental to me is really the cornerstone, saying that, to some extent, just like we want to, in those definitions, we've been considerate of expanding the possible use of certain types of short-term rentals, specifically owner-occupied, etc., that the long-term rentals get some amount of consideration as we open them up, and not just in a free-for-all manner.
I think it's going to be really helpful if we can get a hold of a list and see what exactly is being used as short-term rentals right now and where they are. We talked about this early, Laura and I did. It would really be helpful to us to know exactly what's happening right now.
So yeah, and I'm just trying to get this organized a little bit so it's easier to read. So we have kind of an A, yes, B, no second ADU made for second, 1 ZRC member. Yes, on the first ADU manager, cat, do allow. Okay, and I think that this is kind of C. Yeah. So the choices that we discussed here, and it might have been easier if I put them on separate lines, but at least I have the A, B, and C. So one choice was no first ADU, first ADU, I'll change it this way. First ADU must be LTR. LTR and be affordable. Okay. And make it green again. Yeah. So choice 1, first ADU must be long-term rental, perhaps also required to be affordable. But yes to the second ADU, 2 ZRC members said yes. Choice B was we're not allowing STR in the second ADU. I'll just clarify this. not no STR, and second ADU, maybe first ADU can be STR. One ZRC member, I'm just, okay. And one ZRC member said that, and then one ZRC member, yes, on the first ADU, but managed with the cap, whoops, do allow a second ADU. So we had a bit of a mix on that, but anyway, that's just a reminder where we were on that. Okay, we did talk about Granicus, that, yeah, we'd like to get
Wait,
whatever. Go ahead.
did you say in there about the ADU having to be existing at the time of the adoption of the law? I don't think did you write that in there? I don't think you did.
Well, I put that somewhere.
Okay.
I put that, do we want to limit to just ADUs in existence at the time of the law is passed? So that was a question that we had there. So I put it up on part of the definition of for owner-owned property, not the same dwelling unit. So I put that as part of the definition, is figuring out how we want to do that. And then, but this item 3 was about ADUs in general. So I could put that question down there if you think the question belongs down there. But I thought it kind of belonged in the owner on premise, because we wanted to clarify that. Anyway, it's all kind of in here. So, okay. So we also talked about Granicus, about, yeah, it'd be great to know what the county contract covers. And do we want them to write law? Well, not really. We want to write our own law, but maybe get them to review our law, because after all, if they're going to help us enforce it, it might be smart to have them take a look at it. So that was kind of what we said. So other things that we said, we talked about a potential waiting period, and we were talking about perhaps a 3-year wait. So when you buy a new property, that you're going to have to wait 3 years before you can make it an STR. And the exception is inheritance transfer to immediate family members, spouse, child. So that's what we talked about, that I think people were pretty comfortable with. We brainstormed the idea of a lottery, but the consensus of the group was, no, we don't really like the lottery idea. The other question is, if we decide we have too many STRs, how do we reduce the number? But I think that, anyway, for now, we're not really going with lottery, except that we may need to figure out, and I'll add this here, except may need to figure out how.
In just in a world where we don't do a lottery, another just sort of default place to start is a list, like a clean time, in order of sign up list that rotates you once you have it, you have it for X amount of time, and then you go to the bottom of the list. And for that 3-year mark, in relation to that, that 3 years, in my opinion, if I understood, in relation to, say, a list, would be 3 years before you can apply to be on that list.
Well, this is the 3 years. So there's 2 3-year things, 2 3-year discussions. One is, do we require a waiting period? Somebody buys a new property, they can't apply for an STR for at least 3 years. So they know that this is a town that's not really looking for a lot. We're not looking to be overrun with STRs. So people would know that. So that's that waiting period. But then we also discussed about a yearly permit renewable for limited time. That was the other 3-year discussion we had about whether or not, or whether or not do we want to say, hey, even when you get your STR, because there may be a waiting list, do we want to set a limit for how many years you can have it? And I'm stopping and starting sometimes when I talk, because I got to admit people to the waiting room. Anyway.
Well, so if I could, I'm sorry, maybe a little delay on mine. I was referring to the waiting period for new buyers. So I guess in relation to both of those things, and again, I'm just arbitrarily using a list as an example, because it seems like the next fairest, cleanest suggestion on how we might rotate something is just a list. But if someone buys a property, and let me clarify this. In a world where we could, if we're still thinking on the terms that potentially we could have many more, if not possibly unlimited, again, potentially owner occupied, like same dwelling, same property, contiguous property, however, wherever that settles, you know, but I'm really thinking more same dwelling in this case. You know, it would be 3 years before they could do that, but also 3 years before they could get on the list, because in this list, I'm imagining this is for non-owner occupied, where you want, like, because that is again what is in so many ways the sort of focus and discussion of the mediation.
Well,
So I yeah.
So I think what I want to add up here is we have not determined recommended fees caps for the different types, nor have we determined a waiting period recommendation for the different.
Period.
Yeah, sorry, I'll fix my.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry.
Yay!
It
I know,
it felt good to say.
Get the thought out there, and then I'll clean it up. We have not a waiting period.
And I am speaking a little bit off the cuff just to sort of thread some of these needles so that
Sure.
they kind of can materialize a bit. But if we were to say that waiting period was 3 years, I'm saying there's someone just moved to town. They wanna live in their property and also Airbnb it full time, but with them residing and occupying that home the entire time. If the case were that there were a lesser fee for that, and you would still need a permit, but there maybe wouldn't be a cap on the number of permits for something like that. If that were the case, I would still say 3 years before you can start doing that. And
I'm
then
sorry, you're talking about, I guess I learned, so sorry, when I'm typing, I'm kind of listening, but
Sure.
but I'm not catching everything. So you're saying for item 1 through 4, so which of these types are you talking about right now?
well, I in this case I'm talking about item 3, particularly on-premise, owner occupied. Owner is always in the same dwelling at the time of STR. When it comes to the most permissible, the most generous we could be, like, just taking this back to other numbers we've thrown out there, like that 1% threshold we've heard a lot about in terms of like total available housing stock. I wouldn't count this towards that 1% because the home is occupied. The home is being lived in.
Right. And again, and that's what I've set up here is we have not yet, for these 4 types, they'll probably have different fees. They'll probably have different caps. They'll probably have different waiting period recommendation. So depending on what type you have, there's decisions that will go along with that. And we're not there yet. So it's just a point.
Yeah. So, and what I'm trying to clarify and suggest is that in let's use 2 examples then. In the case of 3, it would be 3 years before you can start doing that. Maybe it has a higher cap and a lower fee, but it would be 3 years before you can start doing that. Maybe it's even a lower threshold, but as opposed to number 1, owner not on premises, the entire dwelling is off the market, not available to live in as either a long-term rental or a full-time resident. That, I think, if we're using that same 3-year language, would be 3 years, not before you get a permit, but before you can be put on that list, at the bottom of that list.
Yeah. So we're going to be figuring these out. And I have to say, as we look at the Kingston law, if the owner's on premise, they're like I don't even think they have a cap for that, because after all, you're helping somebody you're helping your own residents. When we help our own Woodstock residents, So we might not even have a cap. There probably wouldn't be any waiting period. and the fee would probably be pretty moderate. So I'm thinking for number 3, it would be pretty easy to do that for somebody that wanted to do that. Number 1 is, well, you're really a business, and so you're going to pay more of a business price for things.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that this is, as Jude and Ed kind of work on the definitions, they may want to consider for the different types what the fee might be, what the waiting period might be, what the might be.
Well, if we could then maybe add a little bit of green text there or wherever we think it's appropriate. We don't have to do it for each one right now, but putting number 1 maybe at a higher threshold for the wait. I do think that even number 3 should have a waiting period. Not the same necessarily. I'm not saying I'm against having they could all be 3 years. I don't know, why not? But I'm not saying they have to.
Yeah, let's get the definitions together, and then we'll get a consensus to committee, because I think I'm more, I'm not jumping in there. I think that there are some things where we want to help the people, and I'm not thinking we need a 3-year for the person who's owner on, if somebody's going to be on the premise and just renting out a room. I'm not knowing why we would need a waiting period, because what we want, again, the goal is community, not commodity. And if somebody is part of our community, I'm inclined to help them out. So if this,
I do agree, it could be shorter. I am just inclined to say there should be some waiting period. Maybe 3 years is high, but
so all I've mentioned is that we need to figure out what it is. So I've mentioned so Jude and Ed agreed that they would work on definitions. And if they're so inclined, because at some point in the process, we need to figure out what are the recommended fees, what are the recommended caps for the different types, and what might the recommended waiting period be from when you purchase it to when you can do this. And again, that we've already defined down here that the waiting period is the exception is inheritance, transfer. So we've just said, I just add a note here, note maybe different for the different types.
Yeah, and Jude and Ed, I'd certainly appreciate y'all including any thoughts you have. Like, even if we say, one year for number 3, 2 years for number 4, and 3 years for the other 2. Like, it's a good jump off point, like, rather than to start with nothing. So I would like to get some numbers in there just so we can start discussing it more progressively.
I think we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we're moving right along. So the lottery we talked about, no lottery except, we don't know when we figure out what we think. And again, the zoning revision committee is an advisory committee. We're not voting. We don't have a final vote on the law. But what the town board is looking for us to do is to think through the different aspects and provide reasons for what we recommend. We'll provide a recommendation and also the reasons for why we had it. But the final decision will be the town board. We're an advisory committee. We're not making this law, but we have a really good track record because when this committee has taken a law to the town board, it's been well thought out, and the town board is, town board has made some adjustments, like with the scenic overlay. And Connor, what I think you might have missed is I did mention the scenic overlay is on the agenda. Resuming of the public hearing is on the agenda for March. I think the 12th is the second Tuesday of March. So it is on the agenda to resume the public hearing. And a lot of times what Bill has is he already has a resolution written to pass the law, so that depending on how the public hearing goes, we may be able to offer a resolution on March 12th for the scenic overlay.
That's so good to hear. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your work. And Ed, you and Ed did a lot of work on that, and the whole ZRC flushed it out, but you guys did the, the heavy lifting. So, but again, so we take things to the town board. The town board will sometimes say, well, can we tweak it here or there or to make it right? And by the time we're done, we have something the town board has adopted. So anyway, that's where we are. So yearly permit renewal for limited time. So, and this is a question of, and so it all keys down to the town board being the final arbiter to say, well, of the 4 different types, what are the caps that we think are really right for Woodstock? And this is where the balance comes in. If you go too crazy with STRs where we don't have anybody living there, we just have a revolving door, we have no community. If we shut it down entirely, we're not, in my opinion, anyway, this is just one person's opinion, we're not Woodstock. If we shut down STRs, that ability to rent out a house, if we shut it down entirely, in my opinion, we're not Woodstock, because we're a tourist town, and to have tourists have a place that they can stay makes sense. We don't want a million hotels in town, so we have a house here and a house there. So in any event, so it's an interesting question of, where do we draw the line? What is the right number? So, but we're not there yet, but we know it. But in my opinion, we need to have a balance.
Well, I do just want to keep that one, again, those numbers that we got from Kai and from I think it was also Granicus and another present and Urana, you know, the 1% on those total home rentals, the you know, the ones that really are off the market. I mean, I'm not even saying that it has to be 1%, but compared to where we are now, I think it's the number that we can circle the discussion, the beginning of the
Well, we can, but then my question is going to be, we have the 4 types. Is that 1%? You know, if we're saying we're going to help out the homeowner that wants to rent out a room, and we might not have a cap there. Kingston doesn't have a cap for that. We might not have a cap for that. So then the 1% is for the, you know, which are the types? So we ought to set our own percentage for the different types and figure out, or in my opinion, figure out our cap for the different types.
I feel pretty ready to just, you know, poll the board like we did for the yearly permit process and the ADU question, just to sort of start putting out where we're at, you know.
Well,
and like
I'd rather see, and I know that Jude is trying to get some numbers from Butch. So she's asked Butch for some, you know, Butch has told her she's got some information. She's trying to get some numbers. So before we straw poll the board, I'd like to, you know, Jude and Ed have agreed to give us some definitions. I'd like to see those, so that before we're actually doing that, I'd like to see the definitions. And if we have a few more numbers, I don't know if the numbers, I don't know if we're going to have information that helps us say, of the numbers that we see, which of those 4 types do they belong with. But I would like to, I don't want to jump into that too quickly. I want to spend a little more time thinking about this, and then, and see the definitions. And then when we can get straw polls once we have definitions that we're actually looking at. That's my preference.
You know, I just want to throw something out there that I was thinking about a lot. And, you know, this is not particularly relevant to this, but when I was on the planning board and our planning board chair referred to Woodstock as being a tourist town, I can't tell you how much he was attacked. We are not a tourist town. We are a resort town. People were really offended by that. And it's just so funny that, you know, how times have changed. They were willing to accept that as the norm.
Well, and my answer to that was, show me a resort. What resort is in Woodstock?
Well, it was more like they're second homeowners, and, you know, but it's not a tourist town. And I do think it's something for us to think about. It's like, who do we want to be? You know, it's that whole thing about community and trying to preserve that, and not just, you know, hand it all over to the tourists. It's just a thought. I just want to throw it out there.
We need to balance. We definitely need to balance. But yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, yeah, but show me a resort. If we were going to call it a resort town, I'd say show me a resort. But anyway, go ahead, Connor, you're going to say something.
Well, I mean, I do see what Jude is saying, and what by proxy of this person, in that Woodstock is the resort. You know,
Right.
people are looking at these homes that they own as timeshares more than they are, you know, residencies. But and while it's not our purview to, you know, we can't fix everything, you know, being members of this community. And again, I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it as many times as I have to, you know, as being the younger person on a lot of these boards, like, I am blessed and burdened by seeing how many of my friends, old and especially young, pushed out with no floor. Like, this is the floor for them. They don't get to just, oh, get up and move to the city and find something better. No, like, they didn't get to, they can't work enough jobs to afford to live in the town they were born, and they don't have the social infrastructure to just pick up and start somewhere else. And so,
Right.
While I'm not saying that is our only consideration, it's not wrong of us to be considerate of.
Right. Well, totally. Totally. So, and I think that's a big reason why we're here, is because the number of people that were told get out because somebody wants to STR the apartment that somebody was living in long term. So it's a real issue. So, okay. So anyway, we talked again about yearly permit renewal for limited time, like 3 years. When we polled everybody that was on the call before, we had 3 ZRC members said, yeah, we do want to have a limit for items 1 and 4 above. And item 1 was the STR, that's only the STR, and item 4 was, hey, I'm on the premise, but I'm renting out a whole ADU. So we had talked about, one person said maybe, and 3 of ZRC members said yes, that we do want to have a limited time so that people don't get the idea that this is going to be the way of living. You might have to for a year, but then it depends on how big the waiting list is and how big, how big is the number of what we think the right number of these are. And then how big is the waiting list, would see how long might it take to get back in there. But you would go to the bottom of the list after 3 years is the theory. So
Yeah.
that's
Also,
out.
sorry. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just with the give the neighbors a break element of this and everything, it's like, also, in theory, there might be more opportunity to continue renting your place if you are local, if you are present in the home. So it's not like the faucet will just be turned off entirely and then you have to sit on your hands for 3 years.
Okay, you can rent long term.
There are, and not just long term. I mean, in theory, number 3 can be what you do in between number 1 and or whatever. I'm just there are.
Yeah. So I'll just make a note here. Property owners would be either a transition to
there's also the option to rent for 30 days at a time. In that, if you are not on the list and you're waiting, you can rent for a month.
Yeah.
Like long term, you're saying, or
well, anything less than 30 days is considered a short term. So anything longer than 30 days is, so if you rent for 30 days or 60 days or 30 days to one person, you'll have the option to do that. There's no limitation on that. And that's traditionally how it was done before STRs.
Yeah.
I mean, people run it for a month.
I do feel like, this is a good juncture to bake in some encouragement towards long-term rental. I do, of course, want to make again, in a world where number 3 has a much higher cap or no cap, as you pointed out in Kingston, that can be an option for people who just cannot long term. But the idea would be that you're there. So it won't be all or nothing. You will have options.
Yeah. So, okay. And I think we'll also have opposition.
Yeah.
But again, as I started out the call saying, the ZRC we're going to put together proposals that we think are best for Woodstock. And again, we're an advisory committee. It's the town board that's going to make the decision. So anyway, other things we already talked about, should we amortize current STRs? So after we decide the number of STRs that is our goal, we need to figure out a way over time to reduce. If we need to beat our number, one-time lottery was the question there. After some number of years, go to the bottom of the list. So that's some of the ideas we talked about. Should STRs require owner on premise? So we have 4 types above. But the other thing though is, but likely limited unhosted. I'll just say note the 4 types. Fixing my typos here. Oh dear. I don't know where things go. I don't know. 1 minute's there, the next one's not.
I just got off a plane. I get it.
Well, it's my fingers. My finger hit. I didn't mean to hit something, but my finger must have hit something because I had something and then it was gone. So And that's why I keep doing save draft, because that would be a disaster to have all of a sudden everything poof. Anyway, so now the other thing that I think is a good thing to think about is, well, I mean, one of the objectives is make this easy to manage. So the building department has to manage this, make it easy to manage. And this wouldn't really make it easy to manage, but it would be good to understand, we may want to have some goals for how many STRs we think are good in an area, because, for example, if people can just take a bus from New York City and get dropped off at the Woodstock bus station, walk to their STR, everything's walking distance from their STR, hop back on the bus, go back to the city, that's great. If somebody doesn't need a car here. But people that really need a long-term residence maybe don't have a car either. So
Yeah.
we don't want
Yes,
to
yeah.
have, we don't want to have all of those premier prime places taken up by people, again, community versus commodity, people that are part of our community if they don't have a car. So we do want to consider, so we still want to consider that. So that's just something
Oh,
that
no, this actually just, sorry, while this popped into my head. So in that way, and this is again, just a suggestion for future discussion, if we could pop back to the lottery list number, the idea of having different lists by district or by
Mhm.
hamlet or something, you know,
Okay.
is sort of an option too. Again, is it less equitable? You could argue maybe, but it is more considerate of the sort of density aspect of this, and it could allow for a more even turnover and less weight overall between switching properties.
Mhm.
Sorry, that is it. Thank you.
So, different lists or different lists, or different renewal. Okay. So, and then the other thing that I'll add this to the beginning, because we have all these things we're thinking about with our 4 types. I'll just say also, do we want any Okay, so lots to be thought about here. Save draft. All right, we're going back down here. So, okay. So we're still thinking about tracking in an area, different categories. We answered above with the 4 categories. Except we talked about temporary structures such as tents. We said if it's a campground, needs to follow campground criteria. Otherwise, explicitly prohibit rental of temporary structures. Example, tents, RVs. All rental structures require Board of Health approval, because there, we may want to address glamping in our law at some point, but I don't think we did yet. But anyway, limit on, so here's the occupancy question. Jude and I were talking about this earlier today. Limit on occupancy, 6 people. So thinking, I mean, I think 2 per bedroom. We need to talk about what age is a child, because our current law says, I think 2 per bedroom, but that a child under 12 doesn't count in the number per bedroom. And my opinion is 12 is, and I always thought this, it's just that when I was on the town board and when this was passed, the rest of the board members wanted to go with 12. So, all right, I went with 12 because I wanted to vote for the STR law. And the majority said 12 was the age they wanted, and that's my recollection of how that happened. Anyway, so Jude and I were talking about whether or not we want to change the age of what, children under for what the max is for a bedroom, 2 per bedroom, and do we want to have a max for a house? And somebody on this call who was not on the ZRC said, well, I got an 8-bedroom house. So, but if you were to have 8 bedrooms filled with 2 couples, with two people each, you would have 16. And then if you're stuffing kids besides there, you can have a whole ton of people. And then you get the issue of problems with the neighbors. So
Well,
if they're all outside running around screaming, then you have noise issues. So we were kind of talking, if I were to say, I think that we ought to change we ought to pick a number other than 12, a lower number than 12 is my opinion for what the age of a child is. That doesn't count when you count the number per bedroom, but I may still go with, say, 10 per house, and children would count in that. So I would think having more than 10 people in a house, no matter how many bedrooms it is, if you've got 10 people in that house, I don't know. That's kind of what I'm tossing out there. I don't know what other people think on the ZRC.
Jude wants to go first. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just looked at the Hurley law, and I had that town of Woodstock, Vermont. They had a 6-person limit. Hurley also has a 6-person limit.
Oh, for the whole STR?
I know. I'm sorry.
For the whole STR?
Yeah.
And kids probably don't count in that number then.
I have to look, but I believe it says, okay. An STR shall host no more than 2 guests per bedroom, is limited to maximum capacity of 6 people per dwelling. Children 8 years of age and under are not counted as guests. So we would have a child thing in there, but they had 6, and so did that other law that I said. So I don't know what the magic number is, but I do think there has to be a limit. And I also agree with you. The age definitely needs to be changed. I'm not sure what it should be right now, but it should be a lot lower than 12.
Well,
go ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Connor.
All I was going to add, this is one of the rarer occasions where I'm kind of at more to the side of, I don't see the limit being the issue. I like a start limit on the amount of people who can be in a dwelling being the issue, so much as our ability to enforce the noise ordinances and have a solid means of conduct. I'll just give you an example of why I feel this way. I don't really use STRs with any frequency, but Megan, my fiance, is graduating from her master's program come August, and it's a very big deal for us. It's been our 10-year project, and no matter what happened, I'm very grateful that I get to live in this town, but that wasn't always a foregone conclusion, and this was always the plan. So we are going to get her family to come down, and we're renting an Airbnb. And there's probably going to be about 16 people there all together, all coming down for their graduation. And so I'm kind of hit or miss with the kid thing. I think a lot of, in my experience, it's been 12 and under, though, I don't know, these kids are getting bigger all the time. If you want to say 8 and under, I could see that being reasonable too. But I personally am not there yet on having a specific cap for the whole house. I do think it's reasonable to have a maximum per bedroom, including even children, because you can't just pile an unlimited amount of kids just because they're 8 years old into a room. At some point it becomes a health and safety concern, and there's fire considerations that come into that too, that I'm sure in the course of being approved and permitted would have to happen. So if it were, say, 2 per bedroom with an allowable 2 more children under 8 years old or whatever per bedroom, I could get on board with that. But capping the whole house at an arbitrary number, I'm not sure of it.
Well, so Ed, what's your thought?
I had to go away a minute. I'm not
What-
willing, but I could lower add the age of a child probably.
And so the question, so there's two questions, well, three questions. So one is restating the max for a bedroom. I think everybody's comfortable with 2 per bedroom.
Yes,
And then children don't count towards the number per bedroom, but then the question of what is the age of the child? I think 12 is way too high. And then the question of should we set a maximum for a house? Should we set like 10 as a maximum, or so because if we said, somebody not in the ZRC was on a call previously, one of our calls previously, said he had an 8-bedroom house. And if
I
you have
remember
two per,
that. Yeah.
if you have 2 per bedroom, now you got 16. And then if they got kids, you could stuff, I don't know how many in each bedroom. So, and I agree, in a perfect world, you're going to be following the noise ordinance and everybody's going to be behaving according to the noise ordinance. But in the imperfect world, if you put 20 people, say, on a property, you have an 8-bedroom house, you got 2 per bedroom and some kids in different bedrooms, you could have 20 people. How quiet are they going to be if they're outside in the summertime?
So Jude, just a point, Jude had pointed out that in other towns like Woodstock, Vermont, and I believe it was also Hurley, was they have 6 person per dwelling caps. Me personally, I'm more of a per bedroom cap when we issue these permits, based on the number of bedrooms. I'm not really in support, at least not now, of a just arbitrary per dwelling limit.
Okay. And Ed, it sounds like you're not
Well,
going.
I've
ahead, Ed.
heard of a STR on a street not far from our house that they rent them out to 12, 15 people. So
I am totally in favor of a cap. I just think, at this, for me, and I keep saying this over and over again, if you are a neighbor, you should not be subjected to that. It's one thing once in a while somebody has a party or they have house guests, but when you're renting and it becomes a hotel and there are that many people in a house, there's that many cars, there's that much noise, there's that much, whatever, it's too much. It's too much for a residential area to absorb. And I am totally in favor of capping the house limit, including children. Whatever that number is going to be, I don't know, but I don't think it should be unlimited. And I understand, Connor, what you're trying to do, but, once again, it's a one-off, right? You're not doing this every week. I don't think we can make the law based on that. And I think most towns do have a limit of how many people, and we can look at Rhinebeck and Red Hook, and we can look at Hurley, and we can look at a lot of places are starting to really look at these laws because we've seen what happens. And it's you can say, oh, we can control it with the noise ordinance. It's not working.
I mean,
excuse me, you're talking about a particular type of Airbnb where the owner isn't there.
Chris, please. I mean, again, I promise we're going to open this
Oh
forum.
my God.
I can see you sending comments in. I appreciate your comments as well. I mean, we're trying to keep this productive and nothing is being set in stone, but thank you.
Okay.
I was just trying to help.
Yeah, thanks. And we'll get to public hearing soon. So I just like to jump in. So for the ZRC, children under, I know Jude said 8 was in somebody's law. 8 is better than 12. Do the 4 of us on the ZRC, can we live with 8 if we say children under 8? Or is there a number we like better than 8?
I'd like to think about that.
Me too. I mean, I
think definitely not 12. Definitely not 12. Okay. Whether 8 is too high or too low, I don't know.
I don't know, because like you can meet, someone put it this way, you can meet a 12-year-old and they think they're 8 or they think they're 30. It's right. Like that's a weird time in your life. But the only thing I just wanted to respond to Jude with is I'm not suggesting a free for all and limitless. I am saying though that if an 8-bedroom house is existing, I mean, in theory, it would be legal for 16 people to live there full time. In theory, that could exist year round. And while I understand it's different with the gathering thing, I am just thinking about, this is the one time where I'm like, I really see, like, you know, these houses were approved with a certain limit, or approved to exist with a certain limit, and if they can house that many people, it really is more incumbent on us. And I think this is also a good question to bring to Butch as well, maybe, since he's enforcement, and if he has thoughts on that. But this is, again, to me, like, I don't want to be non-permissive of someone who has, say, 7 guests or whatever, wanting to rent an 8-bedroom house, and we have this number there, when, again, I think even with a number like 16, with good enforcement, with good clear language, I think it's manageable. But that's just my perspective. Not free for all, but based on what's been permitted to build there.
Again, you know, just knowing of certain circumstances where there's a house that regularly has 12 people in it, adults, 12 adults. And, you know, the police have been called multiple times. Nothing is ever done, nothing.
And
I think it's just, you just have to be realistic about it and do it in such a way that, again, the neighbors are protected. You know, it's one thing if you live next door to, we could get stuck on this all day. So let's just move on.
Oh, sure. I would hope that in this new world, that person that you're talking about would have their permit pulled. Like that will be the track, that type of negligence and disregard for the neighbors would be baked into this equation. Not that I hope, I know that we are going to make that happen. Whether or not, you know, whatever happens with this part of it, that has to be one of our primary concerns. So I'm with you totally on that.
Okay. So I think we've kind of talked about this. We don't have an agreement of the ZRC of whether it should be capped per house. We're okay with 2 per bedroom. We're not sure what the number is for somebody to count as a child. I think we're in agreement that 12 is too big. Do we like 8? We're still thinking about that, but I think we agree. I think I can write down here, but we agree should be less than 12. Okay. I'm watching my clock, because at 8 o'clock we're going to switch to public be heard, because we will have gone an hour and a half. So the other things that we actually didn't really talk about yet, we kind of did. Some of them I think do flow into other things. Limit on number of days can be rented as STR per year. We put a note on the top that we want to consider what the total number, what the cap for the days is for in a year. We have that as a note up above. Limit of STRs in different hamlets. We've made a note of that above. Let me just put here, noted above. Whoops. And make it green. Copy here, we noted that above. You want to think about that. Hurley law is applicable requirement in the zoning law except proof of liability insurance. So we should have that too. Double check.
I don't think they ask for insurance.
As we should.
Well, somebody pointed that out to me.
When you say they, Jude, are you talking about the zoning?
The town, as of now, it's not on the application to show that you have insurance.
Oh, well, that's like a problem for me.
I believe that's
in general.
Correct. I mean, you know, I'm sure most people are not going to be silly enough not to have insurance, but it should be.
But I certainly know of a couple of homes in and around my neck of the woods that do not have any home insurance because they have their mortgages paid, you know? So.
Wow.
Well, that's it. You think that there'd be, that's an interesting point about there's maybe no insurance for the building, but you would think that there maybe should, you need safety of your tenants. So that's an interesting.
I think any sort of permitting process, of course, needs to have liability insurance for at the least. I mean, I don't know what the purview is to require it, because when I found out that you don't actually have to get this type of insurance if you don't have, or you're not actively paying a mortgage or something like that, that's a situation. I mean, it blew my mind. But yeah, so I think that's, if it's not there now, let's certainly send it along as a suggestion.
Yeah, okay, I specify, I added the word liability there. Okay, so nuisance restrictions and so there should be a list of do's and don'ts for each tenant, and that should be on it, right? So wouldn't this be include in list of do's and don'ts?
Right. I wanted specifically no outdoor activities after 9 p.m.
Don'ts. Landlords
Again, from another law.
must provide.
I mean, for me, I'm not so much about the no. I mean, fireworks is one thing. I don't know about fireworks, but you know, no outdoor activities after 9 p.m. I'm not sure I'm there. I want to have language that, you know, is permissive of, you know, good, well-meaning, containable gatherings that, and we have a culture of enforcement around the noise and other issues. You know, that it's incumbent upon the property manager, it's incumbent upon the homeowner, in whichever case we're talking about, occupied, non-occupied, to be present to address concerns in essence as they arrive and before the police are called, so that that culture is so firm that the police don't need to be called because the manager knows this is going to be a problem. It's historically been a problem. And if 6 people are outside around a small fire, for example, talking and hanging out, but then it gets louder and louder, someone is there to say, hey guys, that's too much. And if it were me though, if we had to have a limit, I would say 11 p.m. personally, but I'm not gonna.
Well,
I'm
again,
not. My hat on.
these are things that I found in other laws. So, you know, what we end up with. But I am going to say this, you know, while I might have gatherings on occasion that might be outdoors in the evening, the likelihood of me having those every single night is nil. So the difference is this is a commercial property that's being used for a revolving door of people. And I think we have to be really careful what we're willing to allow to happen there.
Sure, that's fair.
It's
Very
different.
fair.
It's just not it's not a homeowner situation anymore. It's a revolving door of people who will never be back and really don't care whether, you know, the kinds of things that go on. You know, I mean, I'm not saying everybody's a terrible, there are some wonderful short-term renters, I'm sure. And there are some wonderful hosts, I'm sure. But we have to look, you know, look at this globally and like what
yeah.
can happen, what does happen, what have we seen that happens? And again, you know, okay.
Prepare for the worst.
Well, I think the other thing that we need to say here too, though, is enforcement is to the landlord, because we're enforcing with the landlord who may actually lose their permit if repeated offenses. I mean, because there does need to be an issue. And the other thing that I will say too is, from what I'm aware of and we're not focused on the noise ordinance because Supervisor McKenna's focused on the noise ordinance, but in any event, I know for people with the noise ordinance, from going to a public hearing on that, you've got half the people say, oh, we want music in town. The other half people say, hey, I'm elderly. I bought this house when there wasn't music next door and I need my rest and the music's a problem. So even as we're talking about the disrespectful, you know, and even the 9 p.m., there's really not a problem if it's okay with the neighbors, but there are people who've been living here. There are residents who have lived here for decades. And when they bought their house, it was quiet and serene. And it's an issue that it's not quiet and serene anymore. So for now, I'm going to leave the 9 p.m. in there, but everything we're doing here is, you know, nothing's cast in concrete yet. But anyway, so I'm watching my clock here. So we have 5 more things to talk about, but I'm not sure if we can talk about them all quickly. But in any event, we'll pick up here. So the next time, I don't know whether Jude and Ed, if you think you'll have those definitions for next time. So I'm just gonna make a note here. So next time, definitions. next time we'll talk about the last 5 items. We got 5 more items. And then my original thought was, or my thought from previously was that we would actually go take a look at, because when I send the meeting notes out to our ZRC, I still include what the STR committee sent us, because as this list that came from Jude has been excellent at us figuring out the basics of what we think belongs. But then we still want to match it up with what the STR committee, who Kai was joined us one day to say, here's all what went behind that. So we still want to have the STR, look at the STR committee's input and see if we want to adjust any of what we said from that. We still want to look at the current Woodstock law, see if we want to adjust anything. I have the Hurley law, and the last time I sent out our meeting notes, I still included the Hurley law, the Woodstock law. And I don't know whether, Jude, if you have kind of a favorite of these other ones. I know you talked about the Woodstock, Vermont law. I don't actually have the Kingston law. I have the news article about what the Kingston law does. So I have a number of things already, and then you may have some things that you want to look at. So we may, if we finish up this list, if we go through the definitions and finish up this list, I think we should start looking at some of these other documents we have to see if we want to be adding anything to our comments. So let me just make a note. Already received. So that's what my plan is for the next time. So I'm going to come out of, I'm going to do one last save. First of all, very important to make sure we haven't done this. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go into, and I've not been watching the chat because I've been listening to what's being said, but we will go into, and Chris, I promise you, you'll be first on Public Be Heard. So just to ZRC, we're switching out of our meeting. We've been an hour and a half. That's really our cap. Switching into Public Be Heard. I'm staying as long as we got public who wants to be heard. So Chris, you asked to go first for Public Be Heard, and so you're it. You're up.
Okay, I would hope that the other members of this committee stay there too. So I'm here representing the little people who are getting trampled all over with this new SDR laws that you're trying to stop the party houses. I understand that. We have a group that is called the Woodstock Fair B&Bs, and we're trying to, well, first of all, I don't understand how Bill McKenna can impose these extra fees on people by circumventing you guys. I mean, shouldn't he be waiting for your recommendations? There has been no public hearing on this. I mean, it's ludicrous.
The town does reserve the right. The town every year does set fees. It's something that happens in January. I know that the jump was a shock, but almost everybody who's come and talked to us said your fees are crazy to have them where they are. And I do think that they're more normal based on what I see other towns doing. So I believe they went to a more normal state. I do recognize that it was a huge percentage.
I would question that, because I've seen numbers from other towns and they're not as high as this. And it's ridiculous. I mean, who requested this and who came up with $400?
There was actually, people came to us and said, we had different presenters who said the fee should be $1,000. So, and just to say, the town board.
Yeah, was that people from the HOTF?
Wait, the town board does set fees, and they do it every January, and they set the fees for variances and planning board and everything else, dog licenses, I don't know, whatever. It's a town board thing. That is not really up to us, because that's not a zoning issue.
Right, and we're not, and we're advisory to the town board, but that is a town board responsibility.
Oh,
great. Is town board responsibility. So I understand it was a jolt. It was a jolt, but it was horribly under where it should have been. And I know it was a jolt to get
I don't believe that. And you're going to put many people out of business, including me. So thank you very much for that. Now, this question of too many people in an STR. First of all, when you list it with the Airbnb or VRBO, you specify the maximum number of occupants. If you are a resident owner, you're able to enforce that. I mean, my maximum occupancy is 2 people, and I won't allow any more. People have asked me to bring children, and I've said no.
Mhm.
Because it's my house and I don't want it wrecked.
Right.
So, you know, that doesn't apply to the people that I represent, who are also not in town. They're not creating noise in town. We're the people who live in the woods around Woodstock.
Oh,
And
believe me, we've had plenty of noise complaints of people who are in the woods and sound carries. So I will tell you, sound carries. So anyway, that's the
well,
clear message we've received from people who have noise complaints is that sound carries.
mm,
And I'll tell you, it does. I did a review once. I was doing a site review and I had to go up, Rock City Road and then Mead Mountain Road, right? That's what it becomes. And I was way up high. And I'll tell you, there was music on the green by the community center, and I could hear it, and I had to be a mile away. I
but
was
that
I
was
was up.
during the daytime. That was during the daytime.
Well, sound carries whether it's day or night.
But yeah, but it's not disturbing anybody. It's people exercising their right
Oh,
to
no,
play
exactly. And
music.
it was a big town event. I think it was Volunteers Day but in any event, yes, I agree with you. But I will tell you from my own experience, I have witnessed sound carries.
Well, we sent a letter to all the town board members, and I asked you before if you'd received it or not. I didn't get an answer. But what I propose to do is just briefly read this letter to you now.
Is it to us or to the town board?
It's to the supervisor and town board members.
Well, that is not us.
Oh,
So-
blimey.
So can you summarize?
That.
Well,
I
I
can,
know
I
I
can
have
summarize it by saying you're going after the whales, and I totally agree with that. But we're the plankton that are getting dragged along and stamped on along the way, and that's not fair.
But if what you just told me was that you're renting out some rooms in your house and you're there when you're rented, you may not have a cap at all, and you may have a very small fee because you're a community. We're looking for community, and if you're renting out part of your house while you're there, then it's very likely that you're going to wind up with a low fee and and no cap.
Well, I commend that you are actually differentiating between classes of STR owners, but I don't necessarily agree with your definitions. And I'm worried that you're going to go ahead and recommend something that just screws us all.
Well, before you get ahead, if you don't mind, before you get ahead of yourself with that, we have made qualifications multiple times over this that we haven't provided any definitions. What we are doing here is to the benefit of you and to the benefit of this whole process, to keep it open, to keep it honest, and so that you can see how the sausage is made. We are making sausage. We are not selling it yet. And we are doing this, and we are doing this in a way so that there is daylight. And now there will be public hearings. There will be time between now and when we actually have. We just, in the course of this meeting, commissioned 2 of the members, Ed and Jude, to begin a preliminary set of definitions that we will revisit as we hone this, so that we can grow.
So what are items 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Well, I don't have them.
What
They're
are
definitions.
items 1, 2, 3? Well, they're going to be fleshing out definitions for those items and come in 2 weeks. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks because you will get to see them and you'll have public be heard. I know you say you're concerned that all of a sudden the definition is going to get funny from what we discussed in the meeting, but we're all open. These are open meetings. Come in 2 weeks because that's when Jude and Ed thought that in 2 weeks that they may have some definitions to start with. And so that's on the agenda for in 2 weeks from now, is to see what they've got for definitions so far. And it'll be openly done, and you were welcome to contribute.
The other thing I will say is I use Airbnbs when I travel, and I've stayed in other people's Airbnbs. And the good thing about it is these are local people that can advise you on the community and what's going on, the best restaurants, blah, 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 blah. And I do all that. And that's what makes Airbnbs a very attractive alternative to hotels. And I would hate to see that get taken away.
We'll look at the definitions as we go along. And I don't know whether you, this is a very raw file, what we just looked at today. But Chris, if you, and what is your user ID? Because I can send you the types, the 1, 2, 3, 4, as we have them kind of flushed out, so that you'll have it in front of you if I know your ID.
I mean,
Okay, well,
truly, though, you can also come to these meetings and take screenshots. All of this is public. All of this is on YouTube. And if I may, I'm sorry, Laura, because I think it's very generous of you to offer to go and take the extra effort to share with everyone. But that is what we are doing now. The information is not hidden, it is not private, it will be on YouTube in a matter of, you know, a few dozen hours, and you
So
can
this is a
screenshot it.
video of the meeting that will be on
Yes,
YouTube?
every
recording.
single one. We record even the meeting. I asked Laura to record the meeting of just the two of us talking about making a platform for individuals to come and
Well,
submit.
that's an illegal meeting because you didn't have a quorum of 3.
Oh,
Well,
no,
we-
no, it was
not-
a work session. Connor and I had a work session because people at this call had previously asked, can we have a place that anybody can provide their input to this process? And so we're working on getting a Facebook page set up, and we want to get it hooked into the town's Facebook page. So Connor and I had a conversation. It was a work session because we were trying to respond to what the
we
request
didn't
was.
vote on anything. And again, to be without addressing the disparaging remarks that are coming through the chat and through you yourself through the chat, we are all concerned, active members of this community, and we are doing it with our best intentions and with focused minds. We have heard from many groups, not unlike yourself, some organized, some less, and we will continue, but we want to hear from everybody. And we don't have illegal meetings. We don't take votes in secret. And even these workshops, we do in daylight. So please, you know, again,
That's great. And all I ask of you, I beg of you.
it would benefit you. It would benefit you and your position to give us, if not the respect that you would give any person you might pass on the street that you would consider a member of community. Give us the benefit of the doubt that we are working with good intention and that we are not, in fact, full of it or trying to just, you know, scoop up the plankton, as it were.
I've
We
been
are
a good
coming up
boy
with
all this
multiple
time, and then the McKenna tax comes out.
multiple definitions so that we can increase opportunity while we also deal with what has become run amok. And that's it.
Okay, I want to, well, and I'll let Jude go, and then we'll get Michael. Michael's had his hand up forever here. So Jude, why don't you put quickly, and then we'll move to Michael.
Well, I just want to say that, you know, you have a certain perception of what you're doing and maybe people you know are doing, but there are other things that are happening in Woodstock that you may not be aware of that are affecting the town. In other words, there are investors who are coming to Woodstock who are buying homes simply to short-term rent them. And then what that does is that raises the price of buying a house so that people who might want to come here and live here can't afford it. They can't compete with cash investors. They can't compete with people who are running a business. And so, you know, the reason the town is looking at this is not to punish people who live here, who need a little, you know, extra cash or have a, you know, an accessory dwelling unit or an accessory apartment. That's not the point. The point is to get this under control, because what we have in Woodstock right now, and again, when I get the list from the building department, we'll understand a little bit better what we have. But, you know, the number that came out is we have something like 11% of our housing stock is being used for short-term rentals, when the advice is generally around 1%. So we're saying, okay, we can take some of these 1 through 4s, whatever, I'm not going to memorize exactly how we labeled them, but some of these things, we don't even have to cap them because we know these are community members. okay? But what we're trying to control is those investors, those people who don't live here. And, you know, and I understand you've got people in your house.
I
and
agree. I
you want
agree
them
with
to
you
be-
totally.
You want them to be responsible. It's your home, you care, you have neighbors, I'm sure you have a relationship with.
Yeah, just don't punish us along with them.
But we're not worried about you. Understand that's not what this is about. Okay.
Well,
So
you've got to worry about everybody. You should be inclusive of everybody.
Well, yeah, but that's why we have the 4 types. That's why we have the 4 types. So the people like yourself who lives here and you're going to rent out a part, but you want a little extra income because you want to rent out part of your house for a little
I
extra
want to
income.
pay my property taxes.
Well, totally. And that's who we want to help. We want to help people. Yeah, that's what the type 3, I think, is the one. That's what type 3 is.
Three.
Type 3 is, what do you say, Connor? It is 3?
Three.
I think it might be
Yeah,
four.
well, I think 4 is, well, anyway, I believe it's 3, but we'll go back later. So
It
in
is
any,
3.
that's what type 3 is. Type 3 says that you are actually in the building and you're renting out pieces of the building while you're there. That's type 3. You're exactly
Yeah,
who we
but now
want to
you've
help.
thrown in the business of sharing a kitchen, and that totally spoils it.
Oh, because, but if
All
you,
right,
but
so-
if they have their own
if I may, this is devolving into unproductive. I will repeat myself one more time. We are not carving into stone. We are generating a discussion that is based on more than just the input of yourself and more than just the consideration of yourself and the group, however large it may be or small it may be, of people that you purport to represent. We have a lot of consideration. Yet did you not open your statement saying I represent?
That's right. I represent. I don't purport.
Yeah, we have to get to Michael. So
understand that other people have considerations. We have other people who want to speak. We're not. This is a discussion. It's not something that we are carving into stone. And again, it would serve you and it would serve the people you represent well to be able to engage in a discourse that does not disparage the process, because it's a process. It's not.
I'm prepared to do that.
Yeah, I'm taking it back. I am the chair. Michael, I'm going to you. You've been very patient. Thank you. And you're on mute.
Hi. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Michael.
Thanks for the opportunity, and I do appreciate all the time that everyone is devoting to this and the thoughtfulness. I think the creation of different categories is definitely a step in the right direction. I do want to just emphasize that category 1, you've sort of lumped investors in with people who we are, a lot of people in our group who are homeowners who have had connections to the community, many for generations. We consider ourselves part of the community, and maybe you don't, but we are not investors. I bought my house 20 years ago before Airbnb was a thing. I plan to be moving there full time, within the near future. But it's important to not lump investors as this and then overbroad. There's already protections against investors if it were enforced. I'm curious, like there's the 180-day limit in the law now, which has never been enforced. I'm curious what would happen if that is enforced. I'm curious what's going to happen with the new higher fees. And I have a feeling that a lot of STR permits are going to shake out this year. I would certainly suggest to this group to wait until at least April to see how many people don't renew with a $400 fee, because there's probably people who have STR permits who aren't using them at all. So that's one thing. The other thing, I'm a little confused about the age limit and what the goal or the concern is there. I don't know if it's a noise concern or
I think
for
me, what it is, and I have shared being a little less, of a top priority concern, but the concern for me is health and safety, because it's not so much about for me, the age threshold, 8, 12, to me at this point, it's a little bit whatever. But when it comes down to the bedroom and saying that, there needs to be a limit of like how many people can be in a bedroom, and then how many children, again, not counting against any fees or additional consideration can we put in there before, and I think I saw something pop up about the fire code that can and should certainly inform it. So my consideration is less about what's the difference between 8 and 12 so much as how many children are going to be allowed to, on top of what would be considered, I suppose, the standard occupancy for an existing structure.
So you're
That's
worried about the number of bodies in a house.
Yes, not as
For fire purposes. Because in terms of actually in a bedroom, typically, if we have a couple with a 12-year-old, the 12-year-old may end up sleeping on, if all our bedrooms are taken with couples and they also have a couple of kids, they'll be sleeping on a sofa or an air mattress or something like that. They're not in the little bedroom. The other thing I wanted to say about that, though, it becomes a little unwieldy because of the way the rental platforms work. They don't let you say, we can accommodate 6 adults and 2 kids under 8, right? They only say number of people. One of the attractions of Airbnbs for travelers is it is an affordable way for families to travel, as opposed to a hotel, would have to get many rooms. And I, as a homeowner, I much prefer, and most of our clientele are families. I'd much rather have a couple of families with a couple of 12-year-olds than a group of 26-year-olds, right? That's much better for me and the neighbors. But Airbnb, if there's 2 families traveling, let's say 2 couples, and they each have, one has 2 kids and one has 3 kids. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're 7, and I'm limited to 6. Airbnb just lets me say 6 people. So these renters won't see, my listing won't come up for them, even though it's a perfect house for them and it's safe and all that. So there's a logistical issue with how Airbnb and these other platforms work, which I just want you to be aware of. And one last point, and I'll move on. We keep on hearing about this 1% or 2% number. It is just a completely irrelevant number for Woodstock. It's not the Woodstock. Something like 50% of our tax bills already go to out-of-town addresses. Woodstock has for generations been filled with second homeowners. The 1% or 2%, maybe that's right for New York City or for Kingston or even for Hurley. You should be comparing to other visitor-based economy towns. I know Woodstock is not just a visitor town, and I completely agree with community, not commodity. And what I'm trying to emphasize is that there are some of us who feel like we're being lumped into the commodity lump when we feel like we're community. Thanks.
Well, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, so if I were to sum up of the things we've talked about, so one of the things that you prefer is that we kept the 12-year, and I'm not saying that we will, but I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. So you like the 12-year age limit to say, hey, if the person is 12 or under, they don't count in the number. You prefer the 12 or under rather than the 8 years and under.
Well, to be honest, the Airbnb platforms, the platforms considered their magic number is 18.
Yeah, what he's saying is that there isn't actually a way on the platform for them to make a distinction regarding children or not. The thing is this is this thing with the children particular, again, let's just use the 8-bedroom house because I like that example. It's been used a lot. Let's say they could rent to 2 people per bedroom. They would be able to list 16 people, and then maybe in their description on the listing, it could maybe say plus X children plus an additional maximum X children.
Right, that's what we do now, but the problem is the visitors will never see the listing. So forget the 8, I'm not interested in renting my house to 16 people, but let's say a 3-bedroom house that can accommodate 6 adults, but there's 3, let's say 3 couples traveling with a kid each. Okay, so they're putting into the Airbnb, when they're looking, they're putting in 6 adults and 3 kids, 9 people. my house will never show for them. It won't come up.
So,
Never seen
so
it.
they're, well, I mean, again, I have seen other list types of things like hotel services and stuff. And again, this is where it gets a little strange in terms, for me, it's more about our ability to enforce this. And I do wonder how we would enforce this. But in my estimation, you know, it would be about listing the max amount per bedroom and then expressing a consideration. I mean,
Yeah, so I just because I've been through this with William at the building departments, because this came up for us, because we were listing for 3
William-
bedrooms. I was listing 8, we can accommodate 8 people, and then the listing said 6 adults, you know, plus kids, right? But then William said, no, you can't do that. You can only list it for the 6. So now families with 6 people plus a couple of kids won't see my listing.
I think
So
that's-
maybe that's, you know, maybe that's something that can be taken up with William and say, hey, this isn't what we intend. But, and look, I don't want to get too hung up on this. It's just a
what was-
technical thing that I think you should be
No,
aware of.
I
as
think it's a
practical
good,
matter.
it's a good angle to look at, and this is exactly the kind of thing that, you know, we need to make sure we have our hands around when we make these determinations. So if so I'd say, you know, the type of considerations that we're going to make would be to put that sort of thing to bed, so that whatever is agreed upon for, you know, that general occupancy plus X amount of children, that it can be listed accurately and advertised accurately and also enforced. So it is
I
well
would
received.
appreciate that. That would be good.
Yeah,
I-
but and of course, we don't have any control over how the Airbnb does their application.
No, exactly.
Anyway, Jude, you wanted to go next.
Yeah, I would like to talk to the building department about this, but I would also like to ask, how many nights do you Airbnb your house?
How many nights do I Airbnb my house over the years?
Yeah,
It's varied.
No, per year.
Per
Per
year.
year. I don't know. Some years we've done it a lot, others less often. Sometimes we're there every other weekend, sometimes we're not. Things went crazy during the COVID years, then things have fallen off. We mostly are not rented right now. That's another thing you should be aware of, by the way. The market is tanked. I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah.
Lisa, you haven't had a renter all year, right? Something like that. And a lot of people who did get in with visions of dollars dancing their heads for SDRs are selling. So things may shake out on their own more than you think, but.
Right, well, that's true. So, but you can't give me a number like, you know.
I mean,
days
there have been
a year.
years when we've rented probably 100 nights or 120 nights, suppose. Is that possible? No, because it's mostly weekends. No, that would never be that
Well,
much.
there's 50 or so weeks in a year, right? Well, 52 weeks in a year. And if you rented,
If we
Yeah.
were renting like at the peak, maybe we were renting 3 weekends out of 4, and then occasionally like Christmas week, and in like August, people might come for weeks at a time, you know, for a week or 2 at a time. I don't
Yeah.
know what that adds up to.
okay. Well, I saw Ralph with his hand up. I think I saw Ralph with his hand up. Hi, Ralph. Hey, you're
Yeah.
on, and there you go. Now you're off mute.
Yeah,
Go.
but again, thanks for your work, you know, and I think it's really important, obviously. So we moved up to Woodstock about 11 years ago. We bought our property 15 years ago, and we made certain decisions, you know, to upgrade and renovate in houses, in a house that basically literally fell down. I think that I remember Alan coming to us, you know, and I did a lot of the work myself back then, and said, like, I'm not giving you too hard of a time, because without people like you, this house would fall down. And it's true, you know, with what we basically purchased. However, 3 years ago, you know, when basically the law was put into place, we decided to take a whole other mortgage out, you know, and are fairly deep in a hole now. We have 3 kids up here. We live here full time. One goes to Ontiora to go to the day school. They transition also to Ontiora over. And we find ourselves with discussions now where, even though you did it under the law, lawfully. You followed the rules. We live here. We never had an issue with any of the Airbnb tenants in regards to noise. No issues with any of the tenants. Heavily involved in the community. If it's like, you know, we give to the library, we are involved with the Woodstock Riding Club and so on. But we hear, you know, the lottery, which is, I understand, is off the table now, but it's always for me is like, did you give time limits, for instance, with Airbnb? So I'm wondering if you guys help me pay my very expensive mortgage then as well when my time limit is over and I have to wait for another 3 years to get my license back. So
So
it's just,
can I, so just to
just finish very quick. So it's these things that are really worrisome, you know, and it's also, you know, I know what happened in Kingston and you all like praised the law there. I had an electrician over doing work for me last week, and he basically told me the other side, you know, that he has a hard time with a few of the clients that get paid at this point because they can't pay their bills anymore and they lose their homes, you know, where first they were encouraged to actually do what they do. And then all of a sudden, like the rug was pulled under their feet. I understand that these are not your intention. I totally get it. And this is work in progress. And most likely, you know, the people that are lawfully doing what they do will hopefully be whatever they do within the law, support it, you know, and gotta feel safe after the new rulings come out or if the new law comes out. It just hasn't been spelled out yet. And I think that's the only thing I want to say. There's a couple of other things I heard tonight, you know, where I have my thoughts as well, you know, again, like the kids' time limit, don't fully understand, but that's, you know, the main concern is literally one to survive.
So if I, yes, I'm sorry. I can't see you anymore, Laura, just so you know. So sorry.
I'm
Go
here.
Go for it.
I
There
can,
you
I
go.
can see me. I can see me, but Jude wanted to go.
Right, so do you have like an accessory apartment? Is that, because you said you live,
I do.
so you have an accessory apartment. That is something that we are also looking at as a different category. You're a resident.
I have an accessory building, not an
Okay.
apartment.
So it's not an apartment, is it?
No.
Well, it would be an ADU though. It sounds like an ADU. Does it have a kitchen?
It does.
Yeah, see, and that's an ADU, and that's Chris's issue too. And I think that we didn't make up the definition. I have to go in the current law because ADU was actually a term that we put in the housing law proposal. I think the old term is accessory apartment, so we'd have to go read accessory apartment. But and I could look it up actually because I can go right to the E code law. But if accessory apartment says, hey, if you have a kitchen, if somebody could fully live there, like if they have a kitchen, that's part of the current definition. So we'll have to go look at the current definition of accessory apartment, but it may be that what you have actually is an accessory apartment and it's already defined in the law. So
yeah.
So we're trying to look at, we're trying to look at your kind of situation. You may have something that you know, there's a fine line between a guest house and an accessory apartment. And I think the main line is the kitchen, which is kind of a joke, but you know, we're looking at people like you who live there, who have an apartment or a guest house differently than we're looking at the whole house rentals.
Yeah,
But yeah. You know, we haven't come up with numbers or anything like that yet, but we are differentiating you from other kinds of short-term rentals. So I'm not
I fully understand restriction if I know before I invest, you know, that what I do might actually be a problem for me later. You know, I have a house that I rent, you know, let's say it like that. Okay, you can call it ADU or whatever. The definition is always a little flimsy when it comes to the zoning laws. I'm an architect myself. That's how I make my living. You know, so having said that, it's always, you know, there's always fine lines you can draw.
Okay,
And
so okay, I think I've actually heard you speak on this before.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying
yeah, I was at every town board, you know, because every single time it's kind of like, and it's again, like I don't represent any specific group, but I know a lot of people that are heavily affected by that. And it's literally like, I pay an insurance that costs me $2,000 a month because it's an Airbnb insurance that only one carrier offers. So just to be safe, you know, because I have obligations to the bank as well. My mortgage went up dramatically. I pay all of a sudden $1,500 more from 1 week to the next because of the fact my interest rate went up a lot. So all this stuff, my taxes went up a lot, you know, so all this stuff adds
Oh, we're
up.
under the tax cap. I gotta tell you, the Woodstock
No,
taxes.
I'm
under
just
the
saying,
tax cap.
that I'm
But,
saying,
but you're paying school tax, you're paying county tax,
yeah,
you're
of
paying
course,
library,
of
you're
course.
paying, you're paying.
And I'm not saying that I mean, that's the American
Yeah.
system. I'm European, you know, we have different tax laws there that potentially might work better or not, you know. However, like anything that happens now with restriction to us who invested under the current laws, you know, anything that happens, things are so fragile at this point that if you say like, hey, you can't do this or that or limit this or that, it literally will force me to sell my property. And the thing is that if somebody comes to my home, I have a very nice home, I guarantee you that the people who will buy my home, and I know a lot of people who feel the same way, these are not people that will give back to the community, because the inequality allows all of a sudden people from the city to come up here and spend a stupid amount of money and keep their houses empty. So what you're trying to do as well is sort of something that you're not helping, because that I heard last time you talked about like there's no more kids. We have 3 kids, and everybody who lives there of my friends who came up from the city like years ago have kids here. So you can't always like talk about these 2 Woodstocks. You know, Woodstock is Woodstock. I heard of Woodstock. Of course, we had a coffee house in Austria. I admired a guy back in the late 70s who told me he traveled to Woodstock. And whoa, so cool. It's a tourist town, period. So it's, for me, the tough thing here is literally like what you don't see is that Woodstock at this point ran away from you to a certain extent. It's so hip, and all the restaurants is so nice, you know, that always it attracts a certain buyer that doesn't have to give back. But what it will do is it will force people like us out, and we're going to be replaced through people that actually don't care so much, and they will not be active part of this community. Never, ever.
Okay. Your point,
That's my thought, you know.
your point
And
is,
then one more thing.
No, hold on, Jude. If this is Ted, I'd like to hear what Jude has to say.
no.
But let me just say one last thing, please. Let me say one last thing, and then I'd be
Well,
quiet.
hang on, I'm the chair. This is public be
Okay.
heard. Ralph,
Sorry.
Ralph, say your last thing, Ralph. Say,
Yeah.
because this is public be
And it's
heard.
always
You're the
like,
public, this is for
For
you.
me, it's always like you always blame Airbnb and whatever, and all of a sudden people are forced out. It's nothing Woodstock, you know, that people are forced out. Their whole world sees this notion of people moving to city because there's bigger opportunities. What this does to this community is that we all of a sudden pay $50 to a carpenter. We pay $93 to an electrician. We pay our cleaners $30 an hour. So all of a sudden what we do as well is we create people that can afford more and reinvest in their homes and live better themselves. That there's always people, you know, that fall through the cracks where the politics should work for them to actually help them out is perfectly right. And my take on this is different than Chris's before. Charge us more. But if you take away what we have, it literally would kill us. And we have to move out, and we're going to be replaced by people that you certainly do not want in this town. I can tell you this much from every single time I listen to any of these conversations, because it's always about a certain people that you do not want. And I'm also not big fans of them because, you know, I'm with you much more than you would think, you know, but at the same time, it's also, I need to make ends meet as well.
Yeah. Now, before we go to anybody else, I do want to share my screen for another moment, because I did find, I'm in the law here, and just this is the definition of accessory apartment. Because we're saying we're going, and again, ADU is a new term. It's in the proposed law, but the proposed law has not been adopted. So we're using the current law. And if I look in the current law, just want to let you know, accessory apartment within a single family dwelling, there is some descriptions here, and somewhere in, yeah, the accessory apartment shall be self-contained, separate cooking, sleeping, and sanitary facilities for use by the occupant. So that's the definition I'm seeing of accessory apartment: self-contained, separate cooking, sleeping, sanitary facilities. So it does look like what Chris has is an accessory apartment. And anyway, and then if we continue down, there's a detached structure. But in any event, I just wanted to share 260-59 and 260-60 is where we do find information about the accessory apartments. And we are looking to distinguish whether you have just a room or whether you have and we should give a little more thought to that, because you can have just a room and throw in a hot plate, and now do you call that a kitchen? So, you know, you can have a refrigerator. I go to a hotel, it's got a refrigerator, Sometimes you go to a hotel that has a kitchen actually, but in any event, so we should give that a little more thought about, you know, does the kitchen define it? But that's what really what an ADU is you have a place to sleep, you got a place to cook, you got a bathroom. That is kind of an ADU. And that's kind
I
of what we're
appreciate,
saying.
I would like, before we lose the thread, to hear what Jude had to say in response to the public be heard. I'm sorry, but if we can all check out 260-59, please forgive me. I'm usually remiss not to, I'd love to
Well,
go
you just
late.
traveled. You had a big
I'm
trip
on
today.
Zooms here, and I want to keep the discussion.
And welcome home, Connor.
Thank
Well,
you.
go ahead,
You know,
Jude, and then we'll go to Lisa. And we shouldn't be wrapping this up because we're almost another flower. Go ahead, Jude.
I'd like to hear Jude's response.
Yeah,
She had
Jude next. Jude's going
Okay,
next.
so just want to go back. There is a distinction between a attached and a detached accessory apartment. That's always been there. I just said, Ralph, your point was well taken. I do understand what you're saying. I also want to say, though, there is a limitation in this town that you are allowed to have one short-term rental on your property. I just want to make that point. And you know, we have to, as I said, I would really like to see what we have now as in terms of short-term rentals that we already have, the illegal ones, the legal ones. We just need to know what's here, and then we can look at what we need to do. You know, all of us here are, you know, I mean, I'll speak for myself. You know, I bought my house 43 years ago. I can tell you, when I look at my old tax bills, I laugh. You know, we're all struggling with all those things that you are. I live in an old house. I have upkeep. I have, you know, insurance. I have all those. We all understand all of that, and you know, and we're trying to take all of that into consideration. So, so your point was taken, and we're working on trying to figure it out. The other thing is, you know, what we're listening to right now. And we have to keep this in mind, is what we're listening to is people who have a specific interest. They have a financial interest in this, but there are a whole lot of people in town who don't. And their needs and we have to respect who they are and why they're here as well. So, you know, just take that for what it's worth. I'm not saying we're not listening to you. We are, clearly.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah,
But
no,
we do need to look at, we have to look at the town holistically. And, you know, and again, you know.
Yeah, I do want to go to Lisa. Lisa's had her hand up for quite a while.
Can I ask one question? It's just a question. I want to clarify from the opening remarks. You said you are a full-time resident, your children go to school here, and you are present when your rentals are occurring. You or someone who is living on that property full-time is present during the rentals?
My wife and my 3 kids, my dog, my cat. Yeah, we all present all the time. I
Okay.
barely the city anymore. I live here. I'm my best friend is Chris Nair from the lumberyard.
And listen, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. It's just, I believe you. I'm not trying, I am not trying to disparage you in that. I'm trying to get clarity because, again, to the point that we made with Chris earlier, this is why there are distinctions. There is a very good chance, and that like you will be part of this group that will have a much higher, if not potentially unlimited cap. We are not, the point is that this is going to be very targeted. We are working in clay, not in stone. Look, and so I want to put you a little bit at ease in that there is a special place in our considerations. Right now, it's number 3. That is your place. Number 3 for people who live here and who operate these businesses. So I don't want to go too deep into that because we really do have to move on, but I want that to feel.
So you will see me in 4 weeks again, you know, to make another point, you know, so I will be back.
And you're welcome. But let's go to Lisa. Lisa's been patient. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. I actually want to reiterate, just so you know, that right now, like, my house hasn't rented since New Year's. So there's nothing happened. I have 2 bedrooms. I'm a part-time resident, you know, been there for generations. I want to just reiterate the point of the nuance between investors and people like myself or Michael or Heather and many others who've had our homes for many, many years. We are part of the community. We come whenever we can. Not everyone has the good fortune to be able to live in Woodstock and anymore. We are part of the community, and we also rent our houses part-time. We are part-time residents. We are not investors. I'd like that nuance to be obvious in your categories.
Well,
I want to be lumped in with an investor. I'm not an investor.
well, I would,
Coming since 1976.
yeah, well, I'd like to just ask a couple questions, and please don't take this the wrong way, because I am just asking for some perspective here. You know, my consideration with these categories is not to lump investors in with anyone else. It's to assess the state of a home in a residential area. So again, it's hard. I take, this is not to say I don't take your point. When people say they are members of the community, it's hard for me to imagine being ingrained in this community and not knowing, say, any of the dozens of people that I know who I would love to infrequently or frequently long-term rent parts of my house to, but I don't have unlimited space. I have one space that I can rent out to someone, and I rent it out full time because otherwise they also wouldn't live in this town or in this area. So my question for you is, what is that distinction, in not just in terms of how it benefits you as you see yourself involved in this community, but in terms of how is it different from the state of the house? Like, we have a house that is either occupied with a long-term resident, someone who is present, I would say, at least 3/4 of the year, and I do mean a full 3/4 of the year, if not more, let's be honest, and a house that is primarily not available or unoccupied. It is not available to be resided in what we would maybe consider loosely a full-time resident.
There's
I'm
a
trying to
third
understand.
option, which is what would happen is you sell the house to a rich person who leaves it vacant 90% of the time, but doesn't need the short-term rental income. And that's the reality for most of these houses. They're not going to become magically affordable just because I can't afford to live there anymore.
Right. Yeah. So if I can't rent it out short term and I can only rent it out long term, I won't keep the house, because why would I keep it if I can't use it? I have it because I come as often as I can, more in the summer, more in the winter to ski, whatever, whenever I can corral my kids. I have the house because I love it and I want to retire there. So I can't rent it out for a full year because then I can't use it. So either I rent it out some of the time to families who enjoy it and my neighbors like it when they come because we're not in town, or I'm going to have to sell it to somebody who doesn't need the extra income, who comes a year.
Well, so part of
So,
but one thing,
I don't know if I answered the question because I didn't fully understand.
but one of the things that I want to say though is, so part of what we're still identifying is when we talked about the investor and we picked a number of 30 days per year, and maybe 30 is not the best number to use because maybe it needs to be a little bigger, because maybe I think what Michael said, or I think it was Michael, somebody said that they thought that they had rented their house, say 40 days last year. So maybe 30 is too strict for people that, like you say, it's your second home, you come as often as you can, you rent it at other times. Maybe 30 is too strict, maybe 40 is a better number, because we're not trying to get rid of you, as we say. So maybe the 30 is a little too strict. Maybe 40 would be a number that would allow you to still do what you're doing and still get the days that wind up being comfortable, and you still get some income. So because the investor is the one that really has no limit for how much they're renting, because they're never there and they want to have a revolving door. So so maybe part of the answer in your case is maybe the 30 number is a little too tight. But again, we're just throwing stuff out there to start with. And what I want to say, Chris,
right now, so you're talking about going from 180 to 30. I just want to understand.
But remember we had two categories for if you're not owner occupied. One is 30 or fewer, which is the person who's gone for the winter, they come back, they might rent it out of the 2 months they're gone for 30 days. But yeah, and then the other is if you're more than 30 days, that's the investor. The investor is you're more than 30 days.
Yeah,
And
but
you're saying,
okay, but like
but
I hope
more
to
than
be
30
more than 30,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm not an
yeah,
investor.
but yeah. So maybe
Because
that
it's
number should be.
180 now. We're going from 180 to
Can
30.
I interject something
But
here?
we're separating that group, the group of non-owner occupied that goes up to 180. We're separating that into two groups. The one that still goes up to 180 and the one that is a lot less. But Jude
30
wanna
and
say
under
something.
would probably more like an unpermitted situation. We're saying that without a permit, someone could has the legal right to rent their space for less than 30 days a year. But if you are operating it as a business more than that, then then there are limits. I'm not saying they would be less than 180, but there would be limits.
Yeah, well, and Jude want to say something.
So the law is currently now that you cannot rent more than 26 weekends a year. That is what the law is now.
Or 180 days, no?
And not just 180 days, no more than 26 weekends a year. That is
Right.
the law. Whether or not that's being enforced, I can't tell.
It's never been enforced.
Excuse me. I just
But it
looked
is
at
the
the
law.
law. That's
It
what
is
the
the
law
law.
is now.
Yeah.
It's
So
never been
anyway,
enforced is what Michael said. It's never
well,
been
yeah, it's
enforced.
never been enforced. But anyway, but anyway, so that's what the law. So I want to kind of move on a little bit because I'll tell you when my clock strikes 9, I'm done. So because we've been 2.5 hours ready. So what I also want to say
We
to
answered that one same question though, and again, I'm just asking. Not, I don't mean to do anything. Just how can you give us a rough idea of how many days you rent a year on average?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I had a whole thing where I couldn't rent for like 2 years because I didn't meet the cap, and so it's been a whole thing. So
Let me rephrase the question.
right now, I can tell you in the last 2 months, I haven't, in the last 6 or
well,
7
why
weeks,
don't
I
you
haven't
guys,
rented enough.
yeah,
I don't
Lisa,
know.
and I apologize for interrupting, but I am trying to move things along. So Lisa and Michael
Sorry.
and maybe even Ralph and maybe even Chris, we meet again in 2 weeks. Maybe you can bring us numbers in 2 weeks, because it's a good question to ask, but maybe you don't have it off the top of your head. I mean, I have to go look it up. If I were in whatever business I'm in, I always have to look things up, right? I'm not in the STR business, but I know if you ask me a question about something else, I'd have to go look it up. So why don't you, if you could take that as a to-do, to say, hey, for the years that you were in full swing, here's how many days you rented. For the years that you weren't in full swing, of course, the number's smaller, but maybe you can give us some numbers because we're not trying to kill you guys. I mean, you, like you say, you're good citizens of Woodstock, but you're also surviving with your house in Woodstock because the STRs. So given that number, I think would be good. What I wanted to say to Chris and Ralph, who are both, it sounds like you're both renting out. It feels like just a room, but when I go look at the definition of accessory apartment, because it has a cooking area, it's actually an accessory apartment. The new term is ADU, accessory dwelling unit, but that's not in our law yet because we didn't adopt that part of the law yet. Anyway, you have an accessory apartment. It is what it is. It's in the definition. So maybe we need to consider, as I know Jude and Ed are working on the definitions, maybe we need to give a little thought to what do we do about that? Because according to the law, it's an accessory apartment because it's got a cooking area. But in reality, maybe nobody would ever be living there because you don't have enough, maybe just is not that kind of a room. So we want to kind of give some thought to, and it's all about the definition. So we want to worry about the definitions, but the definition of accessory apartment that I just looked at and showed everybody, if you got a kitchen, it is that. I also want to say before we run out of time, so Linda, I saw your question on the chat. Do we have the Facebook page up yet? We do not yet. So Connor and I met with Melanie in the town, and we don't have the Facebook page up yet because what we want to do, the quicker way to do a Facebook page is you pop it up on your own personal Facebook and then you link it to the town. But we're really trying to find a way that we can actually have it attached to the town Facebook page. And that's what so that's kind of the holdup. If we did it the quick way, neither Connor or I thought it would be the right way. And we're trying to have it be actually attached to the town Facebook page, not just a link under like Connor's name or my name. We want to have it under the town of Woodstock Facebook. And so we got with Melanie a little bit on that, and they anyway, so that's a little more complex to do. So we're going to try to, between now and the next meeting, we're going to try to get that up. And Connor is back in town. I'm so happy Connor's back in town. He just arrived back in town after this call started was when he walked in his door, I think. So anyway, so we're.
If I could just say one thing, I was in software development, and before we were able to make up rules and categories of anything, we
Yeah.
needed use cases. We needed to know the specifics that we were trying to support. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably what you need to get. You need more data.
Well, and Jude is trying to get that. Jude is trying to get more data. So, and this has been extremely helpful. I appreciate everybody's patience while the ZRC went through our discussions. And I hope you recognize Jude and Connor and I are still on listening. And I believe we're hearing you. We're not only listening, I believe we're hearing you. And we're, Jude's trying to get some numbers. And this is an evolution. And I thank everybody who's on this call for sharing. I got 5 minutes to 9, but I'd actually kind of like to close now if that's okay with people. And we'll all be back in 2 weeks. And excellent conversation. I thank everybody for sharing. Any before we? Yeah, I see Jude waving. I see Connor's having his dinner. I think we're adjourning. We'll talk in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, Mallory. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. I'm going to stay and capture the comments before I drop off. Okay. Good night, all.